On the 29th of July 1981, a kindergarten teacher entered St. Paul's Cathedral in London and exited a princess. It was a fairy tale 750 million people watched live. The wedding of the heir to the throne was considered a big state affair, and everybody wanted to see what the future queen would wear. Lady Diana Spencer at the time was a shy 20-year-old with little interest in fashion. She needed a gown grand enough as befitting her position of future Princess of Wales, and spectacular enough to be seen on television against the backdrop of the second largest church in the UK, with a very long nave and a very high ceiling. The wedding dress Diana chose was perfect in all its imperfections. It had a tiny bone bodice decorated on the front and the back with antique Carrimacross lace once owned by Queen Mary. Queen Mary was the paternal grandmother of Elizabeth II. The neckline of the dress was a shallow V, decorated with flounces and lace and a bow. Big three-quarter length puff sleeves, also decorated with flounces and lace and bows. The skirt was full, trimmed at the waist and the hem with lace, and supported underneath by netting and a silk tulle petticoat. The most striking feature of the gown was the detachable train. It was 25 feet long, that's nearly 8 meters, and it's still the longest train in history of royal weddings. The silk tulle veil was even longer than the train, 40 feet long and 11.5 feet wide. That's 12 meters per 3.5 meters. And it was embroidered with 10,000 mother-of-pearl sequins. The gown was also embroidered with thousands of sequins and pearls. The creators of this spectacular dress were Elizabeth and David Emanuel. The then husband and wife designers were in their late 20s, and they were not very well known at the time, but they were already collaborating with British Vogue, and that's how they met Diana. The future Princess of Wales liked their young and romantic style, very 1980s, and that's why she chose them to design her wedding dress instead of going for a more established name. The Emanuels had a lot of freedom in the creation of the dress because Buckingham Palace didn't give them any specific instructions, and Diana just said that she wanted to look like a real live fairy tale princess. So, first, the bride-to-be went to the Emanuels' little studio in Mayfair to try different sample dresses, to choose the silhouette she preferred, while David and Elizabeth researched past royal brides and talked with the designer of Princess Anne's wedding dress, Maureen Baker. Then, the designers and Diana spent many hours sitting on the floor of their studio, talking and looking at sketches based on the silhouette Diana had chosen. Tiny bodice, big skirt and frills. The silhouette was inspired by the Victorian era, and you can see this is Queen Victoria's wedding dress. The silhouette is very similar to Diana's dress. And also the color of Diana's gown hinted at the vintage inspiration. It was not the usual stark white of royal gowns of the past. It was made in a creamy ivory that complemented the future bride's skin tone. The materials had to be as British as possible. The lace for the trimmings came from a firm in Nottingham called Roger Watson. The ivory heavyweight taffeta was woven in Suffolk by Stephen Walters and Sons, and that's a firm that started in 1700s and had already worked for the royal family. While the materials were being created, the Emanuels were having fitting after fitting with Diana. She would come to the studio, wear a mock-up dress, and then Elizabeth and David spent hours adjusting the details until it was perfect. The incredible length of the train posed logistic complications. The designers had to measure the width of the nave of St. Paul's to make sure that the train would not be too wide, and also the fitting had to be moved to Buckingham Palace because their studio was just too small. So, in the weeks preceding the wedding, you would have seen Diana walking up and down the corridors of the palace with a mock-up of the train tied to her waist, so she could get used to the weight and the length, while her two eldest bridesmaids practiced carrying the train. The bridesmaids and the Emanuels also spent hours practicing how to fold and unfold the train, because they would have to fold the train into the coach that would take Diana to church, and then straighten it out once she got out of the coach. After the dress and the veil were created, they had to be painstakingly hand-embroidered with tiny pearls and mother-of-pearl sequins that were 3 millimeters wide. That's 1/8 of an inch. David and Elizabeth wanted the gown to twinkle like something out of a fairy story. As finishing touches, they added 2 good luck charms inside the dress: a small blue bow inside the waistband and a small gold horseshoe with tiny white diamonds attached to the back of the label. The curiosity about Diana's wedding dress was so high that the press and the fashion editors hounded the Emanuels every day, even trying to bribe some employees. And the designers took security very seriously. They installed blinds on the windows of their studio. They gave to the royal client the code name Deborah. They hired security guards. They installed a huge safe so that every night they could lock up the dress and everything related to it. And they even went so far as to throw out fabric and thread of the wrong color to mislead reporters. After months of grueling work, the wedding dress was ready, and it was a complete surprise for everybody. It was dramatic but also innocent and very romantic. It was what in the 1980s every little girl dreamed of when she thought about marrying Prince Charming. When Diana exited the glass coach in front of St. Paul's, everyone gasped, including the Emanuels, in part because the dress was so arresting, but also because it was so horribly creased. That was due to the fact that the Emanuels had not factored the presence of Diana's father in the small coach, and because taffeta fabric creases easily. The long veil was secured to Diana's head by the Spencer tiara. Before the wedding, the Queen had given to Diana the lover's knot tiara, but Diana had opted to use one of the diadems of her own family. It had a floral motif and it had been made by Garand in the 1930s by piecing together different jewels already in the coffers of the Spencer family. It's a beautiful tiara and it's relatively light, but it still gave the bride an incredible headache that day. Diana also borrowed a pair of diamond earrings from her mother, the Honorable Frances Shawn Kidd. To go with a striking dress, a striking bouquet was needed. It was a cascade of flowers, 42 inches long and 15 inches wide. That's more than 1 meter long and nearly 40 centimeters wide. It was made of gardenias, odontoglossum orchids, Earl of Mountbatten roses. Those are yellow roses named after Louis Mountbatten, who was Prince Charles' beloved great-uncle, and he had been assassinated only 2 years before. In the bouquet there were also stephanotis, ivy, trastescantia leaves, white freesias, lily of the valley, hebe, and a sprig of myrtle that, according to royal tradition, came from a bush planted by Queen Victoria in the mid-19th century. Diana didn't have just one bouquet, she had 2, one for the ceremony and one for the official pictures. That's because when the Queen married Prince Philip in 1947, her bouquet went missing after she left church. As you can see in these official pictures, she's bouquetless. Diana's hair was done by Kevin Shanley from Headlines, which was Diana's favorite hair salon at the time. The bride's makeup was minimal and it had been applied by Barbara Daly, a makeup artist for Vogue. As perfume, Diana picked Quelques Fleurs by Houbigant. It's a white floral perfume with notes of jasmine, tuberose, and lily of the valley. Unfortunately, she spilled some on her gown just before leaving church. She didn't want to tell the Emanuels that she had ruined their beautiful dress, so she resorted to clutching the folds of the skirt to hide the stain. But what she didn't know was that the designers had planned for this. They had created an overskirt to slip over the dress to hide a stain or a rip. The wedding shoes took 6 months to make. The cobbler selected by Elizabeth and David was Clive Shilton, famous in the 70s for his handmade shoes and handbags. Diana wanted low heels because she didn't want to appear taller than Charles. Shilton wasn't shown the dress, but he was given the ivory silk taffeta used. He embellished the low-heeled pumps with hundreds of sequins and more than 100 pearls. Chilton also fashioned different trimmings to put on the front of the shoe, and Diana picked a heart with a lace frill. The soles were in soft suede to avoid slipping, and the arches had been hand-painted with Charles and Diana's initials, joined by a heart. Since in England it can rain even in July, the Emanuels created an umbrella with taffeta and lace. And fortunately, the weather was good, because taffeta and lace would not have shielded the bride from the rain for long. Did you know that David and Elizabeth made 3 extra wedding dresses for Diana? There was a backup dress, and it had been created by the Emanuels because they were worried that the design would be revealed by the press before the wedding day. So they started sewing another gown with the same silhouette Diana had chosen, but it was simpler, it was never finished, and Diana never even knew it existed. One day it disappeared from the studio, and the Emanuels don't know what happened to it. Then there was the Madame Tussauds dress. The London Wax Museum asked Elizabeth and David to do a copy of Diana's wedding dress to exhibit, and Buckingham Palace supported the request as it would be beneficial for tourism. So the Emanuels were able to finish the dress before the 29th of July. It was exhibited the day after the wedding. It was, of course, less embellished, the crinoline was less full, and the train was just 12 feet long, about 3.5 meters. And finally, there was the doll dress. The Emanuels knew that Diana's gown would go on display after the ceremony, like it had happened for other royal brides. They still had some ivory taffeta left, so they fashioned a miniature wedding dress to be exhibited alongside the full-size dress. Cheap copies of Diana's gown started to appear in London just hours after she married Charles. That dress was the epitome of 1980s fashions and excesses, and it influenced brides for a decade, becoming one of the most famous wedding dresses of the 20th century. It's now the property of Diana's children, William and Harry, and it's usually stored in Windsor Castle, although right now and until January 22, it's part of the exhibition Royal Style in the Making at Kensington Palace. So, what do you think? Do you like Diana's wedding dress, or is it too much of its time? Let me know in the comments.